Hello and welcome to the DSP Project, your weekly fix of music production and technology. I'm your host Rupert Brown, and this week we are talking about the Jupiter V8 made by Arturia. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. They are a French company and they have produced a virtual instrument of the original Roland Jupiter 8 synthesizer. Now, if you're not familiar with the Jupiter 8, it is a huge piece of synthesis history. It was basically the first kind of professional synthesizer that Roland came out with all of the controls spread out across the front. I believe it was one of the first synths that sort of split out, where you could have a completely separate patch going on to what was going on the keyboard on the low part and high part, so you could do the splits. It is an 8-voice polyphonic analog synthesizer. It has 2 oscillators per voice, and it is a very, very capable machine. You've got a polyphonic portamento, you've got an arpeggiator. So when it came out in 1981, it was big deal synthesizer. It's also been used by heaps of people who you've probably heard of. Michael Jackson used it, Queen used it, Prodigy's used it, David Bowie's used it, No Doubt's used it, and a bunch of other people have used it as well. You've probably heard it on a 100-odd tracks. So it's a big deal synthesizer, very important piece of 80s synthesis history. So how have they done? Well, first of all, let's have a listen to some samples and see what this thing sounds like. Let's start at the start, which is the oscillators, where the sound is initially created. We've got 2 oscillators, VCO1 and VCO2, which stands for Voltage Control Oscillator 1 and 2. First of all, range. On the first oscillator, we've got 4 octaves. And you might be confused by the measurement there. It's actually in feet, so 16, 8 and 2 actually refers to the length of a church organ, how long the pipes have to be to create those octaves, which is kind of interesting. Now for the waveforms, we've got a triangle, we've got ourselves a saw, a rectangle, and a square. Now, you might be thinking that the square and the triangle, the square and the rectangle sound quite similar. They do. I mean, they do sound different. But the main difference with the rectangle is we can actually change the width of it using the pulse width modulation. The oscillator 2 can be used as both an oscillator for sound, but also for modulation. You can use it as a modulation oscillator. I've got a little mix knob here, which mixes between the first and second oscillator. I'm going to swing this over to hard right, giving us just the second oscillator. So the controls for the second oscillator are a bit different. We've got our range is variable in semitones. Got a bit more control there, and we've got a fine-tune control. Waveforms, we've got a sine wave, we've got a saw, square, rectangle, sorry, and white noise. Gotta love a bit of white noise. So listening to the oscillators, let's do a kind of a classic, drum and bass classic. Let's take 2 saws. I'm going to mix them together evenly and then detune them slightly. And then you get that classic sound. Beautiful. Okay, so moving over to the right here, we've got a high-pass filter. Now this is a non-resonant high-pass filter, so you're not going to get a real squelchy kind of sound out of it, but it's still got quite a nice sound. And then moving over, we've got a cutoff filter here, which does have resonance on it. So. And you turn this right up and you can get that real kind of squelchy. acid sound, and we've got 24 and 12 dB slope. VCF standing for voltage controlled filter, and the filter, we've got like a modulation knob here which controls how much modulation, either the two envelopes here, we've got envelope 1 and 2, how much they affect the modulation of the filter, and we can switch here between 1 and 2 depending on which envelope we want to control the filter section. So by default here, envelope 1 is controlling the filter, so if I bring up the attack, you'll hear that the filter should kind of come up, and envelope 2 is controlling the amplitude, so it will start quiet and kind of fade in like that. We've got a VCA, voltage controlled amplifier, so this is quite literally the internal amplifier, and that is the top section. Moving down a row, we've got the master tuning here. We've got a arpeggiator, so we can say set the range of the arpeggiator, say we want it to go down, up, down, and then this is the order, so if I go low, high, and of course random. Okay, in the assign modes here we've got solo, unison, 2 polyphonic modes. The first one, the envelopes aren't always re-triggered when you push the next key, whereas they are in the second one. We've got hold, which allows us, basically the synthesizer will hold the last key pressed. Then we've got key mode, so this allows us to set up our splits, whereas I've just got it on whole here. We've got our presets. You can set up your favorite presets in here. Import, export. This here seems to put a tone out. Maybe someone can tell me what that's all about. I'm not sure. And then we've got the about here. Down the bottom here we've got a bunch of modulation options for the pitch bend. We've got a little pitch bend wheel here, and the all-important portamento. So if you hear when I press between 2 keys here now, it basically just plays one note and then the other, whereas if we turn this up we should get like a bit of a glide that happens between the two. Now let's take a look at some of the features that weren't included in the original Jupiter that Arturia have added in. The effects section allows us to insert an effect between the oscillator and the filter, between the filter and the amplifier, and on the output patches here as well. So let's say we want to put one between the oscillator and the filter. We've got this sound here. So we want to put a ring modulator in there. And as you can see, you've got a chorus slash flanger, distortion, parametric EQ, a phaser, and a ring modulator effects available to you. Let's take a look at the modulation section. I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up. So from the modulation tab, I'm going to select keyboard. Here we've got controls for the velocity and aftertouch, and each of those can control up to 3 parameters at a time. So if I select the cutoff here, and I've got the amount here, and I'm going to crank that right up, and you should be able to hear that as I play quietly to firmly, you get a different cutoff on the key. And what's cool is we can also change the curve on it like this. So now most of the impact will be sort of a low cutoff, and only when I slam the key will I get the cutoff opening right up. So like I say, you can control up to 3 parameters with the velocity, and you've got some facilities for aftertouch there as well. Moving on to the step sequencer, we've got a 32 step sequencer, and again we can control up to 3 different parameters. So let's take the cutoff again. It's a pretty good example, and if I hold down the key, nothing happens because we've got to draw something in. So we'll put a pattern in here, and now if we hold down, you're not hearing anything because I need to turn the amount up here. That changes the amount that this changes the cutoff. So let's try that again. We can change the rate. We can go forward through the pattern, backwards. We can do back and forth, which is like a ping pong type effect. And finally random, which obviously just picks a random step. Got some little pencil tools here. We've got a randomizer, so we can put some crazy stuff in there. We can also we can glide between the different steps. We've also got accents here that we can add on and change the attack and decay of any particular hits if we want to sort of accentuate them. So that is the sequencer. Now comes the most interesting part of the modulation section, which is this galaxy thing. Okay, so we've got 3 LFOs working here and a pretty little graph. So LFO1 controls the x-axis on this graph. So let's say we make this a sine wave on LFO1, and then on the x-axis again we can control up to 3 parameters, but I'll use the cutoff again to turn it off here. I'm going to turn off our step sequencer, come back to Galaxy, and turn the amount up. And so now, as I turn the rate up on this the sine LFO, you will hear it starting to affect the cutoff. And we've got this nice kind of visual feedback of exactly what that LFO is doing. So now on the y-axis we've got LFO2, so I'm going to pick a different shape. I'm going to say a saw shape, and I want this to control, let's say, the pitch of the first oscillator. And as I ramp the rate up, you can see that we get this kind of a pretty graph, but basically we've got the 2 axes kind of working independently of each other, but making an interesting sound. Now where it gets really interesting is the third LFO is actually used for axis rotation, which then starts to sort of blend the first 2 sets of outputs. So I can just manually change the angle here. Or I can indeed use an LFO. So I'm going to start with a sine and turn that up, and let's see what happens. Let's try change this to a saw shape. And that's only putting 1 parameter on each output. So again, having if you stack those up to having 3 parameters on the X and Y output, you can start to get pretty crazy. And this thing's just really trippy and cool to look at anyway, sort of spiradoodly type thing. I mean, look at that. What more could you possibly want from your modulation? So that's the modulation section. So as you can hear, it's very capable. You've got a lot of control, and you can get a bunch of different sounds out of this thing. I will say, for the most of it, it is kind of 80s sounding, which might sound like a stupid thing to say for an 80s synthesizer, but it definitely a lot of the sounds do feel that way. I think that you can recontextualize most of this into modern music, but I think if you're looking for something that is going to create crazy dubstep bass lines, then this probably isn't the right synth for that. But if you're looking for something to make that kind of 80s, classic 80s sound, then this is a great option to look at. Now, how does it compare against an original Jupiter 8? I've got no idea. To be honest, I've never used a real Jupiter 8 before. I have found some samples online where someone had who did have a Jupiter 8, and this plugin had tried to create the same patch and put the results online. And I have to say, compared to the software, the original definitely sounded better. But that being said, if you want to buy an original Jupiter 8, it's probably going to cost you the price of a small car, whereas the software version is 229 euros at present. So it's definitely an affordable way to get those sounds if that's what you're looking for. However, if you are buying a first-time synth and you're looking for creating sort of new modern electronic music, I don't know if this would be the first synth that I would necessarily recommend. But yeah, don't want to be too much of a down on the sound, because it does sound good. It is capable of a huge amount of sounds, and it's a lot of fun with all the controls laid out on the front the way it is. It's a lot of fun to program. It's definitely kind of an easier synth to program. So that has been my review of the Jupiter 8V. If you have any comments, or maybe you've got one of these, I'd like to know what you think. Head down to theDSPproject.com and leave a message underneath this video. If you want to get a hold of me direct, you can send an email to inbox@theDSPproject.com. Also, we're running a competition at the moment. If you want to win one of these, Novation Launchpad, a controller for Ableton Live. Beautiful little gadget that it is. If you're not familiar with it, check out my Launchpad Basics video, because that sort of explains exactly what it can do out of the box. If you want to win one of these free of charge, all you got to do is head down to theDSPproject.com/win, and it will give you the details. But basically, we just need you to redesign a little 3-second snippet of audio at the beginning of the show, and this bad boy could be yours. And finally, I'm at the moment doing a bit of a push on and asking for your help to spread the word of the DSP project. Basically, the more people we get viewing, the more prizes and cool stuff that we can do here. So I really need your help to tell your friends, tell social media, forums, blah 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 blah. And if you can do that for us, that would be awesome. And I promise I'll make it worth your while in cool prizes and things going forward in the future. That is definitely it for this week, though. I will see you guys next week.